We have arrived at that time that we all knew was coming because it comes every time there is a new Street Fighter entry, and that is the time where the community begins to look back at insert previous game title with rose-colored glasses and say things to the effect of, I miss the days of Street Fighter the Last. And in this case, that is, I'm complaining about Street Fighter 6. It's scrubby, it's bad, it's got no neutral, whatever the complaint might be. And I miss the days of Street Fighter 5. I miss the days of V-Trigger. I miss the days of dashing across the screen. Well, okay, so we're going to respond to that first and foremost today, and you guys have already met Catalyst here. He maintains that Street Fighter V is indeed his favorite Street Fighter game to play of all time, and that is including Street Fighter 6. We also have Dream King, who maintains that Street Fighter V is his least favorite Street Fighter to date, and that also includes with Street Fighter 6 in the mix. Guys, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm going to turn it over to Steven first, wherever you want to start with this, reacting to the community talking about the good old days of Street Fighter V.
Yeah, I think that it's, like you said at the top of this, that it happens every time we get a new Street Fighter game. People feel like they can't deal with the new mechanics. They feel like they don't have the answers. They hit these walls, and then they go, yeah, I would rather play the game that I know how to play and that I can get wins at than play the new game and learn and do the work and do the research. This one is very interesting because Street Fighter 6 is it was gearing up to be kind of the return to the neutral and Footsies game and stuff, like leading up to launch and everything. People were very excited about it. Some people do feel like it is that, others don't. And it's just very, very interesting to see people go back and go, well, Street Fighter V was actually really good and Footsies based, and all of these claims that are just, I want to say they're factually incorrect because of just how much hate that game got, how badly it alienated people, and so many people. Like, the game definitely got better over time, but my God, go back and watch footage of that game if you have a logical brain to think with, and just watch it, and it's incredible.
And we're not even talking about when the game released and there were 7-ish fluctuating frames of input lag that absolutely affected how the neutral worked in some insanely maddening ways. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the refined, more final version of Street Fighter V, correct?
Yes.
And still, all right, John, your opinions on your favorite game versus your not favorite game.
Okay, again, I love 6 as well, but 5 is my favorite game. A big part of that is like Rose. That is the best version of Rose that's ever existed, and I can freely and easily admit that Street Fighter 6 is a better game for most people. 5 just happens to be my favorite in the series because of how it played and other stuff, and I'm a huge fan of Marvel, and that is the most Marvel version of Street Fighter that's ever existed. And should Street Fighter be Marvel? The answer to that is probably not. Marvel is its own thing. You should not have too much Marvel in Street Fighter. So I will very clearly acknowledge that and say that for most people, Street Fighter 6 is just a way better game. I get that. I loved playing 5 for what it was. I got super into the game. And again, when you give me my favorite character and you make her the best version that ever existed, that's going to be my favorite game in the series. Like, I love that character in that game.
Fair enough. But if we hone in a little bit on what people are specifically talking about, and that is there are these ideas that the Footsies in Street Fighter V was actually better than the Footsies that are in Street Fighter 6, and I have to say that's widely surrounding the drive rush mechanic. Mm-hmm. What do you say to that? And people say Footsies in 5 was better.
Okay, so as I mentioned, I played Rose, I played a lot of Monat, and I'm known very much as a footsie-based player. That's my main specialty. That's what I love to do. I tried up and down, left and right, every way I could to play fundamental Footsies in 5, and it was just not possible. The best case I got to is about 30% of the matchup I could play Footsies in. 6 blows 5 out of the water in terms of fundamentals and Footsies. But I get that people are upset about Drive Rush and a few other mechanics and whatnot, but like 5 was just like Marvel, where if you were on a certain spot on screen and someone got V-trigger or they got their EX bar, like a Balrog or something like that, you were dead. You could not play Footsies at that point in time. You had to completely change how you played. So Footsies was applicable basically until someone got resources in 5. And so on the Footsie scale, I would put 5 way down on the list.
Steven. Same thought, same question to you. What's Footsies comparison like, and does it hold any water to say that Street Fighter V had better Footsies than Street Fighter 6 currently does?
Personally, I don't think that's the case. I don't think there's any weight behind that argument other than just the fact that Street Fighter 6 is the new thing. Raw Drive Rush is the new hotness. It's the new thing to hate, and it's difficult to deal with for sure, especially if you're not, as experienced of a player and understand how to counter stuff and lab it. I can see how that could be an issue. But Street Fighter V was raw drive rush all the time. It was literally big heavy buttons that were plus on block that would crush counter and get you a full combo, or random dash ups that were into those big buttons that were plus on block, and you had to basically just throw out jabs preemptively and hope stopping forward dashes. Like, there was the YOLO Unga Bunga moves, that EX Chariot Tackle, and Birdie's beautiful spacing where he can do his like headbutt and then he's still within range of being able to punish you with standing medium punch. So much of that, and people don't understand how little you had to work with to counter that stuff in Street Fighter V, where Street Fighter 6, you have a lot of options to counter that stuff. You just have to learn how to use it. For me, Street Fighter V was just the biggest offender of like not having neutral, not having footsies, because so much of it was just encouraging offense with very little options to counter it.
Okay.
Now, I want to push back here real quick and just say that when people say that you have to stick out preemptive moves in 5, yes, but you have to do the exact same thing in 6 to counter many characters' drive rushes. You have to preemptively spot that. Yes, you can do it on reaction sometimes, but a number of characters and a number of setups, you have to preemptively know that someone's going to go for drive rush there and stick out your normal to catch it or to get it in time.
And that might be where the specific rub in Street Fighter 6 currently is. As we talked about in our last episode where we highlighted things like Drive Rush and is it too powerful or what parts of it are too powerful, my conclusion was that Drive Rush should be, it's similar to a jump. It is a little bit of a neutral skip in a sense, but as long as you are able to, if you are looking for it, actively deal with it, and with your reactions deal with it in the same way that, well, they put jumps in the game, but they also have anti-airs and they have invincible anti-airs. So as long as you're ready, you're not overly committed and you're watching, you can thwart, you can deal with it. You have the tools to deal with it. When Drive Rush becomes a mix-up in and of itself, because it's either non-reactable, so I can just do it and you have to hold it or guess, to too much of an extent, or because I can drive rush and cut it short and now it becomes this kind of like Goju game, and that goes into the same conversation as things like dive kicks in midair that change trajectory, or like when Mika does the splash. Those kind of things are in games, but man, I hate that stuff because to me it becomes a mix-up in and of itself, and it overpowers very quickly that piece of a very delicate juggling act that is neutral. So when it's
John,
Street
that's
Fighter
the
6,
Street Fighter 4 version of you talking. It's you players that came from 4 who are so, and 4 is in my opinion, it's close to the pinnacle of the franchise, at least the core entry in terms of footsies. It's like between 3 or 4 in my opinion. And players like you, I see people like you, John, people like you that come from that generation, like, the characters like Ibuki pop up there, or other characters that do that stuff, and they have the neutral skips. It really aggravates those people who are so fundamentally in footsie based and stuff like that, but coming from a different era and stuff, I'm just so used to those characters who kind of skip neutral and stuff, and it's just kind of like, well, I mean, not everyone's going to be playing neutral, basically. Some characters just don't care at all.
Yeah, and we're going to get further into what that all is and what the FGC is saying, what the expectation really seems to be when you dial in and see what it is and what it isn't, what we're actually arguing about in a certain sense. But before we get there, I would say that, yes, Street Fighter 6 does have a little bit of this, that people are right to react to with some negativity. And then I'll go to Street Fighter 5 and play a little devil's advocate, and this feels weird and gross, but I'll do it for you guys. What do you say, Steven, to the fact that one of the best characters and one of the best players showcased their ability, and this is Punk through Karen, with solid footsie play? Confirms. It's not necessarily the only thing, but Karen was known for not having the best V-trigger, and it was all about whiff punishing and hit confirming, and he was able to do that against the best of the best across the world for quite some time. He relied on footsies and won with it.
Yeah, Punk is usually the outlier, but he's just so good, and he can play any character and do really well with them.
I need to
think
jump in on that because Karen was the winningest character in season 1 of Street Fighter V. We ran stories about it. It wasn't just Punk winning with her. It was Justin Wong. It was Mago.
Well,
it was
Punk
a bunch
wasn't
of
winning
other
in
people.
season 1. He kind of had his blow up, I believe, in season 2 and beyond.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think he did.
Yeah, and I think that you can definitely get by with something like that. I think for Punk and Karen, it was more like that was kind of the party starter, but she still had stuff like standing heavy kick, which was definitely a really good normal that would crush counter. She had standing heavy punch, and then a lot of it was once he got that hit confirmed, it was Oki City, right? He was right on top of you, pressuring. You got crouching medium punch like meaties and stuff like that. So I think it was possible to play that stuff, but I also think Karen had a lot of tools that also helped her with kind of just the overall Street Fighter V mechanics and stuff like that as well. I think that would probably be one of the only examples where you could say, hey, like there was definitely more of a Footsies based character here. And it's not like you didn't ever play Footsies in Street Fighter V. That's not what it was. The problem with that game was just it was so heavily like tuned towards offense and things being safe and throwing things out there. That was the best choice to use most of the time. And it was like, well, I could just keep doing this and stay on top of you and keep pressuring, and you just have to deal with it. And you've got like V shift and V reversal, where V shift was starting to get baited a lot at high levels, at the highest of levels, like, towards the end of the game there. And then you had V reversals where you're spending one of your most important resources in the V gauge to get V trigger just to get out, and a lot of times V reversal would get baited as well. And it's like, you can't have a game where it's so heavily tuned towards offense and you don't have enough to get out and deal with it, right? And going back to the Street Fighter 6 stuff, it's like Drive Rush was such a big problem up front, and I think people felt very similarly to what they felt with Street Fighter 5, where it's like this mechanic in particular is too strong, it's too easy to use, and it's too hard to counter. But then it kind of evolved, and now people are checking it, and now if you know how to bait it, you can get big punishes off of it now. And that, we're only 6 months into this game. It didn't really get much better with Street Fighter V, like in the later years.
Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out that clip from our recent episode of Talkin' Block. The whole conversation will be up in a few days, and once it is, you can click on it right here. But if you need to tide yourself over with something else, you got similar content right here. And of course, we would love to hear your opinion on whether or not you think Street Fighter V or Street Fighter 6 is the more scrubby when it comes to Footsie's Street Fighter entry.